I call on Government Order of the Day number 1. Honourable Dr. Order. The Clerk first.
Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Bill, third reading.
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Bill be now read a third time. This bill, introduced as part of Budget 2013, is about enabling tens of thousands of homes to be built. It's about helping Kiwi families to realise the dream of owning their own home. It's about supporting the government's economic recovery plan by reducing the financial risks of Auckland's house price bubble. It's about employment and freeing up land so that builders, plumbers, electricians, drain layers, plasterers and painters can get on and construct the homes that cities like Auckland so desperately need. Mr Speaker, this bill is based on sound research. We've had the Productivity Commission, we've had the Reserve Bank, we've had the OECD and the IMF, and every substantive report on housing highlight the need for additional supply. Mr Speaker, let me highlight the problem. Auckland has just got 1,300 sections currently available for housing. That's a third of what they had a decade ago. We need 13,000 each year just to keep up with population growth. We've got a rigid metropolitan urban limit prohibiting any new housing development beyond the artificial line drawn 15 years ago. We've got a few lucky landowners sitting on the last few parcels of developable residential land, holding prospective home buyers to ransom. Section prices have trebled and gone up by more than any other part of the housing cost equation. We've got a convoluted RMA planning system where it takes an average of 7 years to get a plan changed by the time you get through all the consultation and appeal processes. And even when you've got a plan change, it takes an average of another 3 years to get a resource consent for a greenfields development and a year for a brownfields development. Mr Speaker, we've got a constipated planning system blocking new residential construction, and this bill is a laxative to get new houses flowing. It will enable plan changes and resource consents to be approved simultaneously. It overrides Auckland's metropolitan urban limit, freeing up thousands of hectares of land for housing. It fast-tracks the consents process, enabling greenfields developments to be approved in 6 months and brownfields in 3 months. It makes plain that the government's strong preference is to get this work done in partnership with councils through housing accords, but it also provides that government can get on with the job if councils stand in the way of delivering an increased supply of affordable housing. We have secured the first housing accord with Auckland. In essence, it enables the least contentious 39,000 homes of the 400,000 proposed in Auckland's 30-year plan to be built over the next 3 years. The alternative is that we sit and wait 3 years before we enable any new residential development. That would be a disaster for Auckland and an even bigger disaster for New Zealand. We are also progressing discussions with other councils with high housing costs to use the tools in this bill to facilitate more affordable housing. Mr Speaker, the government has made plain that this new law is just part of a comprehensive plan to address the challenges of housing supply and affordability. We've announced changes to infrastructure costs, with a further bill to be introduced later this year. We've announced the next phase of RMA reforms that will simplify the planning process and require councils to plan for 10 years of residential housing supply. We've got the materials cost work and inquiry, reporting shortly to ministers, from which there flow significant new initiatives. We've got the work on streamlining building consenting and the new online consenting system. We've lifted our investment in apprenticeships. We've trebled the number of welcome home loans. We've announced the expansion of the KiwiSaver First Home Deposit Subsidy Scheme. And we've got dozens of projects underway where the government is directly facilitating new housing developments, like at Hobsonville, Rangers Park in Christchurch, Tamaki, Papakura and Weymouth. This government is directly building more houses than any government in more than a generation. This bill is a critical part of that program. Mr. Speaker, I must put on record the incredibly shallow response from Labor that shows that they have been far more interested in playing politics than helping Kiwi families secure an affordable home. They first described this bill as draconian and going too far, and next minute they say it's tinkering and doesn't go far enough. They demanded urgent action and then opposed urgency to get this bill progressed and filibustered at every opportunity to try and slow it down. They demanded that we secure an agreement with the Auckland Council. They in fact put my picture up all over Auckland, demanding that we get agreement. And then when we get agreement, they oppose the accord and try and do everything to unravel the agreement. And then we have their housing spokesperson earlier in the year saying that it would be very useful for the Reserve Bank to put limits on low deposit loans. And then when the Reserve Bank does it, he attacks them and opposes the measure. Mr. Speaker, during the committee stages, there was this poignant moment when Mr. Twyford claimed the bill had no specific mention of affordable housing, and when challenged admitted actually he hadn't read the bill. It reminded me of that snapper moment with David Shearer, and I suspect Labor will soon have a new housing spokesperson along with their new leader. Even more worrying, Mr. Speaker, is the opposition's intellectual bankruptcy on the core issues affecting housing affordability. Mr. Twyford is on record in June saying land supply is not the issue. He described the Productivity Commission's report on housing as the work of dinosaurs. Even more concerning was the contribution from Labor's environment spokesperson, Marianne Street, during the committee stages, who said Labor opposed reform of the RMA and saw absolutely nothing wrong with it taking 3 years to get a consent for new residential development. Mr. Speaker, that shows Labor is part of the problem, not part of the solution. Labor has repeatedly criticised this bill because it does not guarantee houses at a particular price for Kiwi families. It just shows the degree of which Labor is off in la-la land. Mr. Speaker, they somehow believe that all we need to do to get New Zealanders affordable house is to pass a bill through this House and to say that such and such a price shall be the home of a house and it will magically happen. It's about as daft as the idea from two of the leadership hopefuls that say that all we need to do to lift incomes in New Zealand is to pass a bill through Parliament requiring a livable wage of $18.40 an hour, or the electricity policy that has the government just setting the price and somehow that will work. It shows a complete ignorance of how a modern economy works. Our job is to make the market work for people and for our country. The truth is there are dozens of landowners and builders ready and waiting to get on and build the houses New Zealand needs before we contemplate the government building all the houses we need. We need to remove the barriers and let our Kiwi entrepreneurs and innovators get on with the job. Mr. Speaker, there has been a power of work go into this bill. I want to acknowledge the team at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, the team at Parliamentary Council, particularly Sam Lutulinga and the very competent and focused government team on the Select Committee, all of whom worked under very tight time pressure to deliver this new law. The next step after the passage of this bill will be Auckland Council's adoption of their housing accord next Tuesday and the notification of their unitary plan. This law will then take effect the following Monday. My ambition is to have sufficient special housing areas approved for at least an additional 5,000 homes by Christmas. That's what it's all about, getting on and building the homes that Kiwi families need. I commend the bill to the House.
Order. I call the Honourable Member Philip Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome.
I want to just